Chairman, we should be live.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to our first ever virtual crime and disorder overview and scrutiny committee. My name is Calvin McLean. I'm a councillor in Wilmington, Sutton, Hone and Hawley, and I'm the chairman of this meeting. Firstly, before we do anything, can I take any apologies for absence, please? No apologies for absence?
No apologies for absence, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Can I welcome guests to the meeting? So Councillor Anne Allen, who is the Cabinet Member for Youth and Wellbeing, Councillor Richard Wells, who is the Cabinet Member for Community Safety, and also the Dartford's representative on the Police and Crime panel. Also, we have guests, Chief Inspector Neil Loudon from Kent Police, Sarah Rivet from Kent Police, who is the inspector responsible for the Community Safety Unit. And we also have Rob Slade from the Prevent Office at Kent Police as well. Just for anybody that's watching live, what we intend to do is, as people speak or have questions during the committee, they'll introduce themselves so you know who they are. But you should see a little tag under each person to know who they are. So you should see under my picture a tag with my name and my role for today's meeting. Okay. Next items on the agenda is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest which any members want to declare? No, thank you. And item 3 is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of February. I think we were all present at that meeting. Sorry, Councillor Garden? You're on mute, I'm afraid. Councillor Garden, you're on mute if you're trying to speak.
No, I was just obviously requesting to speak after you ask us to agree to the minutes.
Okay, yep. Does any member have any questions on minutes? Councillor Garden.
Yeah, that's me. Yes, Chair. On page 12 of the document, there is a statement that there will be increased use of social media, especially to councillors. Well, it's now the end of July, and I don't really have seen anything about it. So I wonder if I can raise now the point that perhaps we need some action on that. And together with that, of course, a response from the police crime commissioner, as mentioned later on page 13. So we have minutes, they are accurate, but I just don't see some actions from some of the items that I've expected. Thank you.
Okay, so perhaps, no worries, perhaps we can raise those with officers as we go through the agenda. I'm sure it'll be a most appropriate time to do that. Would you agree?
Thank you for that. There was no A or B, and I just thought I wanted to make sure that got in.
Okay, no problem. Item 4 is any urgent items, and I'm not aware of any urgent items. Is that still the case, David, Mr. Hook?
Yes, that's the case, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 5 on the agenda is to consider any references from other committees, and I understand there aren't any.
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 6 is Chairman's update. So I just wanted to thank everybody for being here in these extraordinary times. Also want to thank Inspector Gavin Wade, who's now left the CSU onto a new role. He'd been a CSU inspector for a couple of years. He's been replaced by Inspector Sarah Rivet, who I'm sure we'll hear from throughout the meeting. So just to send special thanks to him. Just for the attention of people who are watching live, we do have an exempt item, item 9, and what that means is there are items in that agenda item that are quite sensitive and we're not able to share with the public. So what we intend to do, rather than stop the stream and then resume the stream, is do item 9 at the end of the meeting, just to save anybody waiting around if you are watching online. And I'll make an announcement in the meeting as to when that's going to happen, and the YouTube feed will stop there. Okay, my agenda. David, have I covered everything? Am I able to move on to the next part?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 7 then is to receive a presentation from Rob Slade, who's Prevent Officer, Kent and Essex Police. Members, I think you were all sent this item as well, just for ease in case you have any problems with the presentation. I have seen the presentation in online so far and it appears to be working well, but please do have your hard copy ready just in case there are any problems. Thank you. Over to Rob.
Hey, thank you. If I could have the presentation put up for me. Great. Okay. Whilst we've got that beginning screen up there, just to properly introduce myself, as it were, I'm the OCG Prevent Officer in the Serious Crime Directorate. Unfortunately, the same Prevent name, as it were, as Prevent Counter-Terrorism, which can sometimes cause confusion, unfortunately. But I'm part of a team that works within Serious Crime Directorate, supporting both them and also frontline officers known as Level 1, as Chief Inspector Loudon would recognise. We have a team of one cyber officer, a fraud expert, gangs, OCGs, myself, and a modern slavery, human trafficking, and we can provide support to both districts, divisions, and our own directorate with regards to those issues. So effectively, one of our key roles is education and promulgating good practice and identifying things such as this to help our partners. So this particular presentation is drawn from the Europol COVID-19 assessment, which came out in April. That coincided with the NCA strategic assessment. So I have included, just in my personal notes, some additional things from the NCA to support this particular presentation. I drew heavily from the policing insights summaries, and I've included the link there. By all means, it's all public information. It's not sensitive as such. But it gives an overview as to where the Europol consider this block, this area is going to be going. NCA obviously contributed to that. We must remember that with regards to serious and organised crime, and this is what the Europol COVID-19 assessment is about, is everywhere and every day. It costs us money effectively. The NCA consider £37 billion per year is spent with us directly dealing with serious and organised crime, and that's just considered to be a serious underestimate. There's considered to be well over 50,000 people directly involved in serious and organised crime. That's just under the population of Canterbury. And there's 4,772 mapped OCGs in this country. About a quarter are considered to be violent. There's around about 30 in Kent, I believe. And of course, there's increased technical sophistication, as we've seen with Op Venetica. 10,000 encrypted phones have been used on the EncroChat in the United Kingdom, and the dark web is still flourishing. And there's a strong consideration with the NCA that corruption is a tool that OCGs are capable of. A quarter of those OCGs are considered to be capable of corruption, and half are actually active. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Now, the assessment is broken down into 3 phases. You've got the hard copies. This is a presentation which is not my normal style of presentations, to be fair. When the lockdown first occurred, I did this in a very sort of like detailed way. Normally, it would be just headlines and there wouldn't be so much block sort of thing. So presentation pretty much reads as is on the screen. So you have to forgive me. It doesn't have nice pictures and anything fancy. It's very, very sort of like staid. The assessment is broken down into 3 stages. We've been through what was previously the current situation, so we'll touch on that very lightly. And we're now in that process of midterm easing of lockdown, and they have a look forward into the future as well. Next one, please. So there we have what was considered to be the main concerns during the lockdown phase, and we certainly saw this play out throughout in Kent and the rest of the United Kingdom. As you will see, cyber will be a theme throughout this whole presentation, both in the lockdown and the second and third phases. Cyber crime linked in with fraud, and as you can see through there, very, very active, and in many ways you could almost describe criminality as like a virus themselves. They adapt very, very quickly, and it's always the medical science is playing catch up, and in many ways we're the same in law enforcement. We are trying to play catch up with highly flexible criminals, and I'll just draw your attention to the bottom line there. Another highly visible phenomenon has been the widespread scams promoting fake COVID tests, kits and treatments. That certainly happened, and there's evidence of this across the country. So we can now move on to the next slide, please. The midterm outlook. Obviously, this is a Europol document, and each different country was in different phases at that particular time. So it is a general document. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. So what we now move on to is the specific threats. Cyber itself. Cybercrime continues to be a main threat, especially as what we're doing now today. The digital services continue, and we have to use new modes of ability to do our business. And this provides criminals with access points to get into our business, into our homes, and into using things like malware and ransomware for targeting affected sectors such as healthcare and education. And it's certainly been the case is that with the amount of children being at home, sometimes maybe being babysat in front of a computer while parents are working online or doing other things or having to still go to work, they've had significant threat of children exposed with long periods of activity online. And we do expect that as lockdown comes to an end, there may be increases in reporting of child sexual exploitation as they become more apparent. Next slide, please. Counterfeit and substandard goods. Yes, certainly the case. A lot of people, including people I know myself, have ordered face masks, for instance, and come up very, very shoddy goods. So we're likely to see complaints coming in through trading standards, into KCC trading standards, about complaints with regards to counterfeit goods, things failing to turn up. This has certainly been a common theme throughout the period. And as in paragraph 3, there's ongoing international research to find a cure. Fake options are popping up online. And of course, when a genuine product is going to be identified and branded, I'm sure scammers will seek to try and provide ineffective counterfeits. And the final slide there shows as an additional thing with regards to an increase of medical and sanitary waste, and the linking with there is a strong link between some organised crime across Europe and the disposal of waste. Next slide, please. Economy and financial crime. This is less relevant to obviously a more locally based people like yourself, for instance. Obviously, this is more like, for instance, like a huge business centre like London, or as they described it earlier last week as the London laundromat. So, but I wanted to, for completion's sake, to put it in a summary of the whole document. So it's more there for interest more than anything else. Next slide, please. Drugs. Right. Well, there's been little actual change in the supply and the ability to get drugs. Albeit that very, very lately in certain parts of Kent, it's becoming more acute as a result of direct action of Venetic. But if we just take that aside, drugs is imported covertly, and so they just found different ways of moving things about. So there hasn't really been a change in the actual supply of drugs in itself. We still have a high level of purity. Drugs itself is still a massive part of the industry of the OCGs. But as we say here in the first paragraph here, is that the only real change has been down to the market itself. So as the result, as we got smaller amounts of socially based activity, things like ecstasy and that sort of thing have gone down. But the actual trafficking of cannabis and cocaine has continued throughout, and more or less has not been interrupted. Next slide, please. Modern slavery, human trafficking. The actual flow has changed, owing to the movement across borders has changed, but that has also seen an increase in the level of risky kind of traffic. So we have seen, obviously, going across the channel, Kent being right next door to France, an increase in the amount of riskier type of trafficking, and they believe, as a result of the economic instability caused by COVID during the pandemic in some southern African economies, that this is likely to trigger more migration from the south. It's interesting to note that the vast majority of the people coming into this country are coming across the land route still from Sudan, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and Vietnam. But I'm moving on ahead of myself here. So we go to the next slide. It's about organized immigration crime. Sorry, that's fine. So phase 3, the long-term effect. So an overall shift to non-cash payments. I've certainly changed my way of spending money. I'm using my card more. That obviously leads to more abilities for people to use fraud to try and get in on those business. Economic hardship makes people more receptive to cheaper counterfeit goods or recruit to engage in criminal activities such as money muling. And people will want to maintain their lifestyles, so it's very likely that people are likely to be able to still start to accept counterfeit goods. Some of the more threatening OCGs are like to recruit more vulnerable young people. So for us, we were thinking about things like the loan sharking, extortion, county lines we're more likely to come up. So we should be thinking about how do we help to protect our families and educate carers about looking out for the signs of this sort of thing. And there's a great play about the economic crisis often result in the increased susceptibility of corruption to individuals in key positions in public sector. Remember, we go back to the fact is that a quarter of all OCGs are considered to be capable and half are active. Well, that's likely to increase if there's a widespread recession. Unemployment situations may also make spurious investment opportunities more attractive. It might encourage more risky behavior for people wishing to make it's almost like gambling and chasing the debt sort of thing to recoup their losses, and that will therefore increase the pool of potential fraud victims for things like Ponzi schemes, etc. Next slide, please. So cybercrime is absolutely up there in the top 2 or 3. It's unlikely to diminish. These threats will continue and develop. And the interesting thing is the fact is that the bar for entry into cybercrime is increasingly getting lowered. Whereas before it was like you needed to be fairly good and have a significant degree of understanding about how to engage in this sort of thing. The bar is being lowered all the time. As I said, paragraph 3, the lifting of lockdown measures may result in an increase in the number of reports of child abuse. And certainly criminals are now more able to create fake IDs and companies online than offline. New line, please. New page, please. Oh, yep. Was that a page missing there? Just go back again for a moment, please. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I thought there's another page. Yep. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, modern slavery, human trafficking. So migrant smuggling is likely to increase. There is a widespread global expectation of a crisis that's going to drive irregular movements. So we're going to move people, the more common route, which is from the Middle East and Asia through the land route, is likely to change, and an increased pressure from Africa up through Italy. It's interesting to note in the paper that I'm reading about the increase of migrants now from Tunis going into Italy. I think that's the tip of the iceberg, and that's likely to change the dynamics. And this is a really interesting paragraph for me, and something that is making our modern slavery, human trafficking experts quite concerned, is that there's likely to be, with the recession, an increased potential for intra-EU trafficking of victims. What this means is that where there's a likely to moving of individuals from EU countries into the United Kingdom to work cheaper than who are currently working here because of the recession. So there's likely to be an increase in recruiting of people, usually vulnerable, into the country for all those different areas, from prostitution, construction, tourism, all the way through to domestic services. So it's very likely that we need to be raising our game in identifying and putting people through into the NRM. Interesting to note that in the past year, 7,273 people were referred to the NRM. That's 45% up on 2019. So we're likely to see an even greater increase there. And I'd just like to point out as well, there's some myths around modern slavery, human trafficking. For instance, is that 34% of police investigations feature female suspects. It's very easy just to think of men being involved here. Again, this is something that challenges police investigators, for instance. And 3/4 of all victims are in actual fact at the moment UK, Albanian and Chinese. But 3/4 of the offenders are UK, Romanian, Chinese. So again, that to a degree challenges our perceptions on who are involved in modern slavery. Next slide, please. Counterfeit and substandard goods. The recession may prompt a greater demand for cheaper consumer goods across the piece. There's going to be a potential reduced spending power, could lead to lead counterfeiters to expand into further product lines. So we're moving away just from the standard, making use of what is current, the COVID sort of items. However, it's likely to go for a broader range, especially if there's a sustained recession. A high demand and scarce supply of key goods such as healthcare PPE, again, will likely be involved, increase significant levels of criminal activity. And it's a bit of a situation here. The cashless option is increasingly popular payment methods, and that obviously gives opportunities for fraud. Next slide, please. Not really linked to this particular forum here, but again, for completion's sake, should be included. Interesting area here, organised property crime. Okay, sorry, yes, the first paragraph is quite relevant. The new forms of what is known as the nephew trick. And now I haven't heard of that phrase before. It's more of a European phrase, effectively distraction burglaries. It could well be that as we go further into further testing and potentially identifying ways in maybe going into people's homes to do testing, etc., there's going to be a rise of distraction burglaries where people will purport to be healthcare professionals or indeed police, and then distract those individuals whilst the other people are upstairs nicking items, etc. So that's an opportunity for putting out the right sort of communications in a targeted way. Hospitals and pharmacies and other healthcare providers will continue to be targeted. There has been some of this happening in Kent, not a huge amount, but having looked at some of the overnight reports, I have noted just a few, but it still could increase. Okay, and next slide, please. Again, not specific to this forum. It's about the fact is that during this particular time, this is a real opportunity for organised crime to get into legitimate business because of the confusion that is being created during this whole phase. It's been a massively destabilizing period, and as such, organised crime has taken a real opportunity here to move a lot of their resources into areas which were not normally being used. But we'll move on, please. Thank you. Next slide. So we're nearly done. Economic downturn. So key points. Any subsequent recession will see OCGs increasingly infiltrate economically weakened communities. So they're talking about whole communities or whole countries, those which are maybe less as resilient as the United Kingdom. But needless to say, we shouldn't be overly confident ourselves. Vigilance is the key. Individuals and organisations could be more vulnerable to compromise. There may well be an increased social tolerance for counterfeit goods and labour exploitation. I think we only got to really think back to post-war. During the war, 1940s, yes, we didn't like the black market. After the war so much, why can't I have that bit of off the ration? You know, we could be getting that kind of, you know, blinding one eye approach here. The levels of human trafficking and organised property crime in the EU may well increase. There will be increase in digital technology has certainly created a large attack surface for cyber criminals, and it's presented opportunities for law enforcement. I refer you to obviously to the encrypted phones of EncroChat about Venetica, but it's also posing significant challenges. Next slide, please. And I think this is the last slide, as I recall. And I've basically brought these two key paragraphs here just for people to have a thought and review over. So, as I say, the assessment paints some interesting and challenging points of view for us. I think the takeaway at a district level is, what can we do looking forward to the next 12 months to park our most significant amount of resources into protecting our communities, our citizens, our families. And I think the big bang for your bucks are going to be around cyber, and it's going to be around fraud. Okay, and these are the two main areas, but there's still significant areas that we still need to be looking at to support with regards to exploitation of young people with gangs, etc., and also the ongoing issues around modern slavery, human trafficking, which is all around us. And I think that's about it. Yes.
Thank you very much. That was very detailed and comprehensive. I do have questions lined up already for you. You're pleased to know. Before I go to that, though, is there anything our police officers, Chief Inspector Loudon or Inspector Rivet, do you want to add to any of that, or do you want to take the questions first and then take it from there?
Yeah, I'm just conscious of Rob's time. I don't want to take away, detract from his presentation. So I think let's get Rob's questions to him for the panel's benefit. And if you've got any questions after, then I'm absolutely happy to chip in after, if that's in order.
Okay, that's great. Okay, first we've got Councillor Grehan. Just want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Councillor Kelly Grehan. I'm councillor for Stonehouse Ward, or one of the councillors for Stonehouse Ward, I should say. My question really comes from something that happened in Stone right at the beginning of the lockdown. A lady contacted me who was victim of a telephone scam that cost her quite a lot of money. Before I go on, I should just say that she was very much in praise of both the police and the bank, who handled things fantastically from her perspective. So that was great. We worked really hard to get the message out about what happened to her on social media with the parish council and with the police. But I'm at a loss really as to how we advise older people who aren't online about scams that are going round. And I just really wanted to see if there was any kind of advice about that, or if phone scams are kind of a growing problem, or if they're really easing off now so much of it's online.
Well, this is where I put my former neighbourhood inspector's hat on, frankly, is that, yeah, totally get the idea that a lot of people are not going to be silver surfers, as we like to call people of a certain age, and I'm rapidly approaching it myself. You know, let's go low tech. You know, we've got parish councils, we've got newsletters, we've got all the different age community related charities, charity shops. This is where you're utilising your local PCSOs, KCC wardens, etc., can really make the difference. So it should be a targeted approach in that sort of sense. So, for instance, at the last Dartford SOC panel, I shared the 2 latest fraud leaflets that Steve Kelly, our fraud guy, put out. And the expectation I would have is that it goes to the SOC panel, it should then be taken out to the various different partners and various different local communities and various different wardens to go out, because they know the ground, and target those individuals at a front line. And to be perfectly honest, I would say they should be working with counsellors who also have a great deal of knowledge around, because you're the people who they're going to be writing into. You know, I'd be saying there should be a dialogue between local officers and counsellors to reach out to the right individuals. But that's putting my hat on from sort of like 10 years ago, as it were, things like that. 10 years ago as a CSU inspector. I think that's go low tech.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, I've got Councillor Gaskin next, and then I've got one of our officers who wants to ask. Just introduce yourself, please, Councillor, first.
Yes, Councillor Alina Gaskin for Temple Hill. Rob, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I've got some questions looking towards future of the Europol COVID plan, because when we were here last time in February, it was a very different world. So things have now changed completely. Actually, I just wanted to know, have you got some plans in relation to impact of Brexit? Because naturally Kent, Essex will be heavily affected. So, you know, talking about the counterfeit goods, about trafficking, drugs, we are the doorway to UK. So this will definitely, the economic downturn, everything will be affected by Brexit. So is there anything you could add to, to looking forward with planning?
I'm afraid the phrase would be that's out of my pay grade specifically. To be fair, my part of my role is to be constantly scanning out to all the different academic and things like the NCA and things like Europol to pick up any of these kind of strategic assessments, capture them, and make sure they get fed into the decision-making processes. So no, the short answer is I'm not writing up any specific plans, but then that's not really my remit to do so. But that's all I can say on that for the moment. I would suggest that on specifics, that I do know that there are goal groups, there is strategic decision-making groups within Kent Police looking at those sort of things, and maybe Mr. Loudon can come back on that one as well.
Okay, thank you.
Alina, did you have any more questions, or was it just that one for now?
Well, to be honest, I've got lots of questions, but I don't sort of monopolize the meeting. So this was actually the main focus, because we will be impacted by it. There's absolutely no doubt. And even coming back to the money laundering, I know, London is the capital of money laundering, but it's official title, but we are on the doorstep. So, when there will be possible opportunities spreading out to Dartford, there may be something we need to focus on. Maybe it's a little bit under the radar, and it will come this way as well, I think.
Well, it's certainly the case, Councillor, that money laundering itself does go through the big city, but money laundering can also take place in the high street, in Dartford, Gravesend, in any kind of business. And we see shops where you can go in and there's maybe like just a few cans of beans on the shelves, and you think, how can they survive their business rates? It poses questions. So there is always going to be the case that it's not just in London, it is going to be everywhere. But if you have a whole list of questions, I'm more than happy to meet up with you at a later stage and go through those questions with you, if that's okay. That's not a problem.
That's fine. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Okay, I have Tony Henley was indicating he wanted to come in. If you could just introduce yourself, please, Tony.
Yes, certainly. My name is Tony Henley. I'm the Community Safety Manager for Dartford Council. It was just really, Chair, to support Rob in answering the first question around how we get messages out to elderly people around the borough. We do have we will talk about this a bit later on in the meeting, but we do have a daily tasking meeting. Rob's team send us through the details of any scams that's running at the time. We do put it on the internet, but I appreciate not everybody sees that. But we have our KCC wardens who are particularly skilled in engagement around talking to the elderly around that. They do a number of talks at old people's homes, etc., when allowed. But on a bigger picture, we're engaged with Kent County Council on a project which is looking at mapping. Everybody seems to take different details across of victims across the police, across trading standards, ourselves, and other different organisations. So what we're aiming to do with Kent County Council is bring that all into one database, so we can have a core from which we can springboard out in terms of communications. The reality is, unfortunately, that many of our victims are repeat victims. The criminal fraternity, and Rob, when we talk about organised crime, there's a clue in the title there. They are very organised, and they have extremely well developed methods of communication amongst themselves, which mean that people who are vulnerable and are taken for a fraud are likely to be revisited at some stage. So it's absolutely key that we do that work with KCC. We're funding an analyst and a project manager to try and bring that together. And that project has been rather stymied by COVID, as you're going to hear rather throughout this meeting. But we met with him 2 weeks ago, and it's back on track. So hopefully we'll have some news around that in the near future.
Okay, thank you very much. I have Councillor Moat next for a question, please. If you want to introduce yourself, please.
Yes, certainly. I'm Councillor David Moat. I'm one of the councillors for Greenhithe and Knockall. That is rather a misnomer because it also covers the Swanscombe Peninsula. And as we probably all know, if we don't know, there are consultation exercises going on at the moment about the creation of the London Resort on the London Peninsula. Given that they seem to be very keen to get this done and done by 2024, my guess is that this new amazing centre for North Kent is going to change the dynamics of crime, organised crime in that part of the world. And I was just wondering whether Rob has had any thoughts on that. It is something, strange enough, we had a presentation on at this committee, gosh, must be like 4 years ago. But I'm just wondered whether it might be worth resurrecting that sometime in the future, because as we know, there is an element of dark economy associated to anything such as this. Thank you.
Well, the main thing that I'll be thinking about, or I'd have concerns about, is about supply chains and bids, etc. Construction is unfortunately well renowned for one, the employment of people for cash, underpaid, etc. And there's also the danger of unfortunately the corruption. The NCA in page 60 highlighted local councils because of their long supply chains and maybe lack of exposure to it, as it were, are particularly vulnerable. So that's it. That's in the NCA assessment itself this year, which came out in April. So the main concerns I would have, obviously, you've got the sheer volume of additional houses and structures, etc., which is obviously going to cause issues. But from this particular perspective itself, I'd be saying, yes, we'll be looking at concerns about modern slavery, human trafficking, the labour, and those sort of things as well. So yes, it will bring some demand.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Councillor Oliver. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi there, Tom Oliver. I'm the other Stonehouse Ward councillor. Thanks very much for your presentation. So as has already been mentioned, with a lot of these crimes, there's always a core group of career, criminals. So I just wondered if you could expand a bit more on what practical actions will be looked at to make sure that any of these newer criminals during lockdown, particularly the more younger, vulnerable people who might have got involved, can be weeded out early, so they don't, join this more persistent and organised crime group. I don't know if that's you or it's more PC Loudon, but I just thought I'd put it out there.
Well, I can start that off, and then I will direct you, Councillor. You're absolutely right. There's a hardcore people who are lifetime recidivists who we are unlikely to change by offering them a Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme, for instance. So we're not going to be diverting them away from their life of crime. This is what they do, and they tend to do it quite well. The people that you're talking about are the people who are both offenders and victims to a large extent. And this is where I'll defer to Mr. Henley. I know that part of his team's work is that prior to the SOC panel, a serious and organised crime panel that occurs once a month, they also house a vulnerability forum whereby they bring people who are referred to it, but I don't want to steal his thunder. I think that's where Tony, you might want to come in on that one.
Chair, are you happy for me to answer that?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, you can go.
Yeah, certainly. Councillor, in essence, we as a district run a number of forums which we're constantly reviewing. At the moment, we run what's known as a vulnerability forum, which looks at people who have come into our notice across the borough from any agency, and we convene with a multi-agency panel to try and interrupt, if that's the case, or support people who are vulnerable, either through their behaviour or indeed being subject to behaviour which is disadvantaging them. Alongside that now is a growing thing called contextual safeguarding, which recognises, and this is the Kent County Council that are very much the drivers behind this, recognises there are certain elements outside the home that young people particularly might be vulnerable, and it may well be gatherings or certain premises that people attend or whatever. Now, we get a lot of community information. We act on that based on the assessment that we make at the time, and that panel that we are convening now would involve police, ourselves, social services, medical services, people who are actually in a position to support young people who are maybe vulnerable in terms of being exploited. So on top of that, we also run an organised criminal crime group, which is run by the police, which looks at the known organised criminal gangs we have operating in Dartford, and they come and they go. But that our response as a council is that we realise there are more ways to skin the cat than just prosecution. There are other legislation that we have access to through planning, through environmental health rules, those through a number of different ways that we can target gangs that we are identifying are operating outside the law. So there's a whole host of stuff that goes on at a district level, and this is where I work with Rob quite closely.
Thank you. Councillor, does that answer your question?
That's really helpful. Thank you both. Cheers.
Thank you. Okay, I have next Councillor Harman. You're on mute, Peter.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Thanks for the earlier presentation. It was very useful. Apologies, Chair, I was a few minutes late getting on because I had the famous IT issues. I wanted to ask. Sorry, I should say that I represent Greenhithe and Knockall. Yeah, a question about something that's coming up lately is a lot of thefts externally, mainly from back gardens of houses, and there's sort of folklore going around at the moment that there's people are seeing drones in the daytime, sort of flying around the district, and then thefts overnight. It could be a range of things, from garden furniture to to the small pools and things. I'm just wondering if that's something that's come up as a marker sort of in a wider area.
Well, that is that I have heard, obviously, of drones being used for a number of different acts of criminality, primarily smuggling drugs into prisons, etc., and for bringing down a whole airport. But that's the first time I've heard it being utilised potentially in the in sort of like residential burglaries and burglary other than dwelling sort of situations. It's a very interesting one. It's interesting to see that Green Eyes moved on from the time that I was chasing someone with on a motorcycle around Green Eyes, but that goes with the times, doesn't it? I think that's the sort of thing that I would like to hope that would be fed through into your local community team and into Mr. Loudon's team. That if that MO has started, I'd like to do some research on that. That's the first time I've heard of that myself. But that again, that's one of the things that I think maybe Mr. Loudon can pick up. There's as whether or not that's been heard and whether or not that's been communicated up. But I've made a note of that because that sounds like a really interesting and logical step, frankly, as a use of technology to, instead of looking over a fence, why not fly a drone up, see whether the person's occupied, and then do a burglary. So whether it's myth or not, I think that's worth looking into, and it's something I'm going to take away, certainly. But maybe Mr. Loudon might be able to elaborate on actual crime being taken place in the area itself, or that what has been reported.
Okay, well, I have Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Can I come back on that, please?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just to sort of add to that, thanks for that. It is a very much an issue because we're getting, in the last month, I'd say I've heard of about 20 different thefts from gardens, and it goes as far as people's motorcycles. And I'm wondering even if it's been used for sort of car parking because of the type of area it is. Often cars are parked around back areas, but in particular motorcycles. So yeah, I think it's worth looking into. And my imagination was that it was something that's widespread, but so that's quite interesting, and maybe I'll try and collect some more stats on it.
Thank you. Tony, Henley, you want to come back?
Yeah, just I mean, we're obviously, as a community safety unit, we're aware of the folklore. I have to say that we were aware of there was a drone which the police have identified where it was coming from, where it was flying from. They have made an intervention with the pilot, who wasn't. He was just flying his drone, and the police inspected the drone, and there was no camera on it. So I think we're pretty convinced that particular drone wasn't involved. Clearly, the potential, as the council highlights, is obviously there. But actually, at the moment, the evidence in Swanscombe is that we haven't actually been able to tie in a drone to any thefts. The one drone that we have located, or the police have located through their additional patrolling, has actually been bottomed out, and they're satisfied that drone wasn't actually involved. I just want to put some information behind. I know what the community are feeling, but we are working on it with the police.
Okay, thank you very much. Did you
Sorry, can I just come back quickly on that, please, Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tony. Yeah, I was aware of the particular drone you're talking about, and that it was identified as a non criminally related one, but there's been a couple of others. So I'd assumed that it had been flagged up, but I'll certainly work on that and make sure you get all the information we can provide. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to come back on that as well. Whilst you guys were talking, I had a quick Google, and it certainly seems to be that drones have been picked up as being used as a tool for burglary in Cambridge, Suffolk. It mentions on a site as well, and an ex-burglar as well has used them. So it does seem to be a start of a growing trend. Yeah, I'll happily have a look at that. It's not quite within my remit, but it's an area of interest for me personally because it is a novel idea, and could well be then linked into serious organised crime if the things that are being targeted are the things like high value vehicles, which then would lead into serious acquisitive crime. Good debate.
Indeed. Thank you. Okay. I have Councillor Sandhu.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Councillor Sandhu from representing Brentwood in Dartford. Excellent presentation, can I say? And I was just concerned, it was page 19 about cybercrime. The fact that obviously businesses are becoming back to normal now. And I was wondering, was there any increase in figures that you may have had reports upon, the fact that people were working from home, especially while they were furloughed, and some are still working from home? Was there any increase in cybercrime in that way regarding smaller businesses that could be based in Dartford and surrounding areas?
Well, I must admit, I cannot give you any figures specific to Dartford. I just simply don't have access to that. Again, that's more for your local police to comment upon. I can say that there's been a significant increase in small and medium businesses receiving what is known as invoice fraud. And that is something across the country. For those who don't know, what it means is effectively they've already targeted you and understand what your general flow of customer is, etc. Say you have a business, you will get an invoice from someone, Mr. Slade, you done some work for me, and vice versa. You invoice, and oh yeah, that's Rob Slade. That's fine. You pay out, and then suddenly you realise it's bogus, and that's significantly increasing across the country. So that is an area which I know that our fraud officers and our cyber people are working with in producing sort of crime prevention packages. But again, it comes down to due diligence a lot of the time. Unfortunately, a lot of small and medium-sized businesses, quick turnover, people working from home, difficult to control things, what is happening. But it is that is certainly an area in cyber and fraud which is certainly on the increase. Invoice crime.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to take Chief Inspector Loudon and then Councillor Gaskin, and then I want to wrap this one up for this agenda item. So, Chief Inspector Loudon, we know who you are, we know what your role is, but perhaps people watching don't know what a district commander is. So, if you could give a little bit of an explanation as to your role at Dartford. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Councillor. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Chief Inspector Neil Loudon, District Commander for Gravesham and Dartford. And I'm the local senior officer in charge of local policing for both of those districts and including Blue Water. So if I may, just a couple of points I wanted to pick up on in support of Rob's commentary and presentation, and just very briefly around the drone incident around Swanscombe. We don't have any evidence to say that is a MO of criminals or a method of committing crime in Kent at this time. But as Rob said, that's something we need to be aware of. We are aware of it locally. Every call that comes in relating to a drone is assessed by a force incident manager, by a police inspector in the force control room. So that initial assessment can be done. So we can do a very quick assessment. Is this an enthusiast? Is this an item that's being used in the commission of crimes? And these are items that are getting cheaper and cheaper to purchase, easier and easier to use. They're becoming smaller. We're investing in them ourselves as a police force. We have a number of drones that we use to tackle crime that we use locally as well. So, a really effective crime prevention tool, but also we need to be alive to the fact these could be used for criminal purposes. So we are alive to that. In relation to Swanscombe, we are aware locally in the increase of theft from gardens in that area. Inspector Sarah Rivet is more than aware of this. We've got a tasking in place. We've got extra patrols happening in Swanscombe. And Peter, I know that we'll be linking with you closely around that. In relation to some of the online, and moving on to sort of the online crime and the fraud, what I can say is that it is an issue nationally. In relation to online crime, from the period of lockdown, and I'm talking from the 23rd of March, really, from when the UK went into lockdown properly, Dartford has seen about 93 reports of online crime. And when you compare that to Gravesham, which I'm also responsible for, Gravesham's seen about 138. So Dartford is significantly less. When we talk about fraud, again, it's a slightly healthier picture for Dartford compared to Gravesend. So Dartford, we've had 17 reports of fraud, and Gravesend, we've had about 24. And thankfully, relatively low numbers when you compare it to the force counting figures, really. So, we work really closely with Rob's team, the Serious Crime Directorate, and some of the concerns around the big structures being done around the amusement park, the UK version of Disney, whatever it's going to be, there's going to be some significant criminality going on. We're aware of that, and we're going to be working very closely with the Serious Crime Directorate to tackle that at a local and global aspect, really. You know, as well as fraud and human exploitation, there's going to be potentially an increase of thefts, thefts of building equipment, theft from vehicles, of tools from vans. So we're building that into our patrol strategies. You know, we're working very closely with the Police Crime Commissioner to make sure we've got adequate police resources to police North Kent going forward. You know, with the creation of this park, the Bridge Estate, Ebbsfleet City, huge developments that we need to be able to police and provide a good service to. So inherently, we will see an increase of police officers, I'm hopeful, to address that. So lots of work going on, some really good discussions, some really good points. And I just wanted to add a few extra bits from a local perspective, and I hope you find that helpful, Councillor.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Gaskin, please.
Hi, Rob. In relation to the drugs, the impact on illegal drugs being anticipated as not actually having that much reduction, I was surprised. I would have expected that the impact of COVID would distract the usual roads, the usual connections. So I'm not sure what's happening here. Has the system of importing drugs and selling drugs, has it evolved? Because I would have thought that the COVID lockdown has got huge impact, which will continue for foreseeable future. So all the established roads networks, they either are suspended or should have been suspended. Definitely would have changed. So do you have any view, any idea what is happening? Are they evolving? Are they adapting? Because, you know, first of all, there has to be demand. And as we know, you just identified, the demand has dropped significantly because of all the usual places, social clubs, everything's just closed down. People can't even move freely or could not move freely. So this would have contributed to the reduction of demand. So are you anticipating to demand suddenly come up as if nothing happened? Because I think this would be opportunity to really put resources into tackling it effectively, to actually put a longer term reduction plan.
Well, as I say, the main area where drug demand has gone down has been in the social drug stuff, you know, ecstasy, etc., because of the reduction in the large crowd gathering sort of things. Yep. The actual supply of drugs itself, the movement of drugs is covert. And it's not overly reliant on individual people moving around. Yes, there'll be individuals who do drug mules, etc., but the vast majority of drugs that get moved into this country are through container ships and through large lorries, that sort of thing, and of which they didn't really stop at all, because obviously this is an island nation that needs to have supplies, carry on COVID regardless. So to be fair, the actual type of drugs that were being moved around, like cocaine, etc., business as normal. To be honest, we have interrupted other supplies of drugs, of course. You will be aware of the recent Rochester business estate that was supplying millions of street Valium for a Scottish OCG up to Scotland, which was brought down earlier this month, so just up the road there, and that was responsible for 1 in 3 deaths. That particular street Valium. So we are creating our own. Once upon a time, it used to be that we used to import those sort of things in through the country, primarily from the Netherlands. Now we are starting to find that we are constructing our own manufacturing bases internally. And the roads were free, so effectively, because of the pressure on Scotland on that OCG, they farmed out the construction of these drugs down to a quieter part of the country for them. Of course, we don't know much about Scottish OCGs down here, and they happily carried on down here. So, as I say, OCGs evolve like a virus, and as soon as the pressure puts on, they are creative and they move somewhere else and that sort of thing. But to be perfectly honest, the supply chains didn't really change when it comes to COVID and cocaine and heroin, etc., because effectively the supply chains remain the same.
But does it mean that they are stockpiling? Because as you identified, the demand is not there in a way of, opportunity to sell it. So if you've got no opportunity,
oh no, the opportunity was still very much there to sell and buy cocaine. That hasn't changed. When I'm saying about the things like the more social recreational drugs like ecstasy, when you take away the large gatherings of concerts, etc., people aren't going to use it for that purpose. When it comes to things like heroin and cocaine, life carried on as normal, pretty much.
Okay, thank you. One very last quick question from Councillor Harman, and then we're going to move on.
Lovely, thanks for that. Just further to what Neil was saying, going back to drones, so I keep droning on about it, but with regards the thefts, they are being reported, or as many as normal percentage, but with the drones, they're not, because I think local people see them as not being illegal. But is it something you'd want reported? And are there any guidelines that you could send us on just to say what is legal and what's not, so that at least you get the reports if people see suspicious drone flying? Thank you.
Is that for Mr. Loudon?
Yes, it is, please. Yeah.
Yeah, Peter, what I'll do is if Safe Tank's on the meeting, I'll link in with you through Sarah, probably outside the meeting. There's certainly some comms we can get out and that we can get you out to your constituents and your locals, because like I said, we do monitor it and we are interested in those that are flying the drones, so we can satisfy ourselves that these are legitimate usage as opposed to anything more sinister. But I'll pick it up with you outside the meeting if that's in order, but yeah, no problem.
That's great. Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, Neil.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, members. Thank you to Mr. Slade for your presentation. It was really good. It's good to have an overview of what's going on. Obviously, you can't tell us too much because otherwise they'll be ahead of the game, won't they? But I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Just a quick point, just to finish off. I received a lot of additional points there. I'm happy to carry on a conversation via email and do further link up with any of the councillors who wanted to have further points clarified. No more than that, I'm very happy to do so. It's nice to come back to Dartford. It's where back in 1856 I started my career, or whatever it was. So many years ago, happily rolling around with burglars in Temple Hill, etc. So thank you very much for the invite. It was a pleasure meeting you all.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay, but I'm sure you're very busy, so you perhaps want to leave the meeting. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we're going to go on to item 8 now, which is to note a report and receive a presentation on Dartford Town Against Crime, the annual report. Is an officer speaking to this first before Karen does her presentation, or we're just going straight into presentation?
Sorry, Councillor, I'll just quickly introduce it. Karen's obviously quite easy to capable of speaking for herself, but we introduced this item. It's a standing agenda item every year. However, I'm very conscious of there are some new members on the overview and scrutiny, so we've sort of pared it back a bit to give an outline of what the DTAC is about and how it operates, but also to focus on the work that Councillor Allen has been instrumental in promoting is around the shop safe scheme, which is actually does dovetail very nicely into some of the work we're doing in relation to communicating with our more vulnerable people around all sorts of issues, one of which of course is it could be cybercrime. But if I could hand over to Karen, that's where we are. Thank you.
Okay, Karen, over to you if you want to introduce yourself and crack on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hello, councillors and guests. Some of you know me already, I know. I'm going to provide with a presentation really pretty similar to last year. There'll be a few updates and additions to that, bearing in mind we're a year down the line. I think, oh, here it comes. Those of you who don't know me, I started working for Dartford as the Dartford Town Against Crime Intelligence Manager in May last year. if you can just go on to the next one for me, next slide. What I want to cover with you really today is just about what DTAC is, what my role is, how our members benefit from the actual partnership, what's been happening really around COVID and the effects that that's had on our business partnerships. The DTAC board, who oversee and manage along with Dartford Council what I do throughout a day. And as already mentioned, Councillor Allen, with the Shop Safe scheme, I have an update from last year on that for you. A very brief input around Crime Stoppers, who came to visit us last year, and more or less really where we're going to go with, or I'm hoping to go with DTAC in the future. Next slide, please. Thank you. For those of you who have been around Dartford Council for a while, you'll know that the partnership was developed a long time ago now, back in 2003. It was a result of a combined partnership, which was between local businesses, the police, town centre management, and lots of other agencies. I have a board of management which consists of 6 people, those of which represent certain aspects of the businesses in the town. Debbie Carey, who is the manager of the Orchard Centre in town, is the chair and has been so for some considerable time. She's incredibly supportive of myself and the work I do and what we do with DTAC. And she's supported on the board with Councillor Chris Shipham, Lewis Kernan, Paul Shaw, who is from the McDonald's franchise, Rob Burdett, who is from the Priory Centre shopping centre, and Jordan Crane, who is the manager of Attic nightclub. The board itself oversees the work that I do. It's not a profit scheme at all. However, I'm very lucky in that I'm one of the very few partnerships, or if not unique, I believe, in the county, to have the partnership supported financially when required by Dartford Council. That has really allowed me to keep DTAC running throughout the whole of our COVID lockdown in particular. The support really that I've had from the council has been phenomenal. It's quite big business with the crime that we have going on in Dartford, as I'm sure you appreciate. We're sort of strategically placed in the north end of the county. So we have cross-border criminals who are able to use the M25. They can go from county to county. We have criminals, transient ones, that will come down from the Met and the metropolitan regions as well. That can make for some difficulties in working out who will and who persistently commits crime in our borough. But the idea of DTAC is to try and reduce that crime and the antisocial behaviour, and basically to allow people to go into town and feel safe to do so, and to promote a safe environment for the public so that they can go about their daily business when they're shopping in town. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you. My role, I said last year I came into the role. I'm also, there's a few of us about, I think, retired police officer. I retired as a police inspector for Kent Police. I also started, as Bob did, up in the north part of the county in Gravesend and Dartford. I've been away for the last few years in my service, but I used to work down in the community safety unit, doing the same role that Inspector Rivet does now. So I've got an understanding of how the council works and how the town works and how our transient criminals have the effect that they do in our borough. I'm there really to effectively facilitate the flow of information between the partners and the council. Our partners are everything from the business members. They can be from outside agencies. In particular, it could be from probation. It's from other partnerships around the county. So I work quite closely with Sophie Jordan over at Gravesham. Also with the partnership at Blue Water and over at Maidstone. And now we're starting to link quite a lot further afield now with East Kent and down to Dover, around Ashford and around Swale. So I'm sort of the person in the middle there to sort of help facilitate what goes on up at Dartford. We are able to identify offenders that are working around the county as a result of that relationship. So it's something that is getting much better now, with us all working together as closely as we do. I'm using civil powers to deal with, or sort of criminal powers to deal with persistent and recidive offenders. We have various pieces of legislation around, one of which I will go into a little bit later, around the Antisocial Behaviour and Crime Policing Act, which is something that I'm using against our persistent offenders, but I'll cover those a little bit later. I have an intelligence system as well, which is also shared by some other partnerships and other police forces. We are able to link in together through that system and work out, again, who our transient offenders are. I have meetings as well with all of the partnership members where we can sit and discuss all sorts of things together around training, training issues, use of radios. I have briefings with them, not quite as frequently as I would like at the moment, and obviously COVID has put pay to that for now, but we'll discuss that again a little bit later for my plans for the future. We have crime trends. We have organised crime groups, as Bob has already discussed. We have the same thing. We have groups who will beg down in the town. We have people who will come in mass into the town to commit shoplifting offences and bulk shoplifting offences. All of which are organised and very well coordinated in different places around the country. So sometimes we'll have them come down from outside of the county, but we also have our own that are sort of homegrown. I work with the town centre community every single day. They will pass information back to me about things that are affecting their business. But most of all, I am still tied to legislative compliance as well around the work that I do, but we'll go into that a little bit later as well. Thank you. Next slide. Councillor Allen, those of you who know about the Shop Safe scheme, we had some difficulties in relation to this due to GDPR, and when that came in, there was lots of information that we were holding on individuals, quite personal information around medical problems and vulnerabilities that we had to get signed up again. So in January, we had a relaunch of the Shop Safe. We did that at the Elders Forum down in the Orchard Centre. And we are still collating all that information together now onto a new database. Dee Mangat from Dartford Council has helped me phenomenally, really, with this. We had literally hundreds of people on the old system, and because it hadn't been updated for so long, we had people who had passed away and were no longer with us, people who had moved. All of that data had to be recollated and popped onto a new database, and we are still in the process of doing that. Unfortunately, COVID again came along, put us into lockdown. That caused us a few problems with being able to attend a lot of our vulnerable groups. It's still on mine and Dee's list to do once the lockdown lifts and we're able to get out and speak to people. We now have a new system. We have new forms, new application forms. We've had a big push through town to get our stores involved in ShopSafe, to be aware that we have vulnerable members of our community who sometimes have a really difficult time when they're down in town, and will always and may want to look for somebody for reassurance or assistance. What we're able to do with this information is provide them with a key ring, and also a sort of a credit card size card that has a unique reference number on it. All of that collates with the database. So if somebody feels they're having a particular issue, or they're having a medical emergency or something like that in town, they can pop into one of the stores that's got the ShopSafe sticker in the window, and the staff there will be aware of what they need to do next. Basically, we have a radio system in town. As you know, you've probably heard it when you've been shopping down in the town. That radio will then provide all the people on the other end of that radio, which is security at the Orchard Centre and also our Dartford CCTV hub, and us in the Community Safety Unit, have access to that database. If it's required by any medical professional, they would be able to contact us. And if somebody, for example, was unconscious or unable to communicate, they would be able to get details of next of kin, contact phone numbers, friends or family that we are holding the details for that particular individual. So it's a fantastic system that we have in place. It's just COVID has stopped us from expanding the way that we want it to, but it's certainly sitting there waiting for us to do it. We've had occasional new forms have come through for registering during lockdown, but we've not been able to push the way that we want to some of our vulnerable forums. But hopefully now we've got that all up and running properly. We are now GDPR compliant, and actually have a database that is fully updated with everybody's new contacts. Next slide, please. Back to COVID again. I think we know that this has probably caused lots of issues for many of us over this lockdown period. The biggest concern I had around this was the effect that lockdown would have on many of our businesses, and I was expecting really a big influx of phone calls and emails and etc. to say I'm sorry that our business is no longer here due to the financial issues around lockdown. We need to give you your radio back. In order to counteract that, I conducted a review around the fees that we charge for COVID to try and make it more accessible to some of our smaller businesses, not the big businesses that have managed to stay open all throughout lockdown, but our smaller businesses who have now found themselves with a much higher footfall due to people going more to their local news agents, their local off licenses, places that, and a lot of our express stores that have had massive increase in their take-ins because people don't want to come down into town. So I'd looked at how we could do that to bring people on board. We now have a new structured fee, which has gone through our DTAC board and has been overseen as well by Dartford Council. It has been really well received, I have to say, by some of our small businesses, to the extent I have 7 at the moment that are looking to come on as new members. They've currently got new, all the application forms, etc., and they know what's happening. So having been in lockdown, they actually understand, you know, how DTAC can support them with the use of the radio, with the use of the intelligence database and the updates that DTAC can provide when we have our briefings. We have had some government funding, of which I have a bid in currently to also help with the smaller businesses. The funding came through basically around communications and how that money could be utilised, in particular in town around communication. So we're looking at helping with the money, helping some of the smaller businesses come on and make use of the radio and DTAC generally for a trial period of time. So it's about purchasing those radios and allowing them to use those radios for a trial period of time and the services that DTAC provides, with a view to in 6 months' time seeing whether they benefit from it and then hopefully staying on the scheme. That is literally where we are currently. So I'm just waiting for that to move that forward. Thank you. Next slide. The benefits for all of our businesses, and we have very good camera support in and around the town. It's the biggest benefit to those who have businesses within the town, because we are able to use the CCTV cameras to watch and monitor the movement of our offenders if they're committing crimes from one store to another to another to another. It also allows us to evidence those, to obtain descriptions, areas of directions of travel, and to identify organised crime groups, in particular around pickpockets and things like that. CCTV will pick up, monitor and manage that because they have a sky view of the town. So the biggest benefit really for most of the members in the town is that CCTV coverage. I have a radio link to a network of cameras and the security staff, and also to Kent Police. So our town beat officers carry them. The town police community support officers carry the radios. We now currently have 2 hosts who are working post-COVID in the town around public reassurance, doing a fantastic job as well. All of them of which are on this scheme with the radios. The intelligence database we have will provide every week on a Monday. It's something that I manage. I will update it with current offenders that I've dealt with, offenders that police have dealt with, offenders that may have been deterred from committing crime in town. And that newsletter is put together by the actual database itself, which sends out to all of the members that are on there with who our current offenders are, so that they're aware of who to look out for. That database has a marvellous instant messaging system as well. We used to use WhatsApp in days gone by, but unfortunately WhatsApp isn't secure enough to be able to pass this information on. So the DISC database, as it's called, it's managed by a company called Literalis, and it has an app which you can download to your mobile phone, so you can you have it mobile with you. The advantage of that is if anything is happening in stores, people can quickly fill in a quick message on there. They can take a very quick snapshot of a picture on a screen on their in-store CCTV screens, security screens, and send it out to all the other members on a very quick message, so that particular person can be identified by security staff on doors around all of our businesses. The offending behaviour, as I mentioned earlier about the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act, allows me to deal with persistent offenders through criminal law. What it really does is we have a system of processes, obviously, as we always do have, but we have the first part of this will be the community, sorry, a bit of a blank there, community protection warnings. What that more or less is a letter that I will hand to them, or the police will hand to them on my behalf, to give the offender certain prohibitions. That could be anything from not attending any of our Dartford Town Against Crime members' premises. If they do, they then breach that warning. It could also mean for some of our town centre, from our drinkers and those committing antisocial behaviour down there, it can work quite closely with the public space protection order that we have down there, banning people from attending that particular area for certain times throughout a day. They can be quite specific to an individual on whatever their behaviour is. The breach of a warning is fairly simple. It only has to be once, and once that's done, we then go into a community protection notice, which is the first stage really of this piece of legislation where we are heading towards court. That tells them that they are no longer under a warning, and if they breach that particular notice, then they will be liable for a fixed penalty fine, or sometimes, depending on what type of behaviour they're displaying, we can look at all sorts of other pieces of legislation around injunctions from a civil point of view, or around criminal behaviour orders from a criminal point of view. This is the first time it's been used in Dartford. I have a lot of people on various bits of those. In fact, I have 12 community protection warnings already out there. I have 13 community protection notices and 3 of them on fixed penalty notices. So that's a lot of information that I collate around those individuals in order to keep sort of Dartford clear and safe of our persistent offenders. I'm supported by the National Association of Business Crime Partnership as well. I receive information from them, so I know what's happening nationally. And also the DTAC meetings, as I've said, or I've explained, I think already, is there around training where it can be of assistance to our members, support and guidance, and it gives me an opportunity to go through who our criminals are on a regularly for those who don't have or don't want access to the database. Thank you. Next slide. Currently, I have 65 members in the partnership. That's around the town and also externally. So I have some stores that are at Temple Hill, some at Swanscombe. I had only the one at Swanscombe at the moment, actually. I have some out at Darenth, and some up West Hill towards the Met. So as I said, there's another 7 that are waiting to come on. They're all varied. Some are nighttime, some daytime economy. We have now got an extended radio coverage, which is something which was my first job when I started last year. We'd had some issues with radios. We were having problems with the coverage we were getting. So we've had to invest some money into sorting that radio network out, which is what we've now done. And I'm now oversee the running of 150 radios across the whole of the borough. That includes internal departments as well. So things like your park rangers, you've got your parks officers, everybody within the CSU, and lots of other council departments as well, your CEOs. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Last year, Mark Salisbury approached me in relation to Crime Stoppers, who had picked Dartford to host a new initiative, which was to host the most wanted images on their digital media screens. It was the first opportunity they'd had to do that. I've had some feedback from them actually, telling me that they'd had, out of 18 individuals that they've been rotating on those boards throughout the town, they've had 14 of them have been arrested. They can't pinpoint as to whether all of them have come through people in Dartford seeing them on the screens, but certainly a large proportion of them have. So it's been a very, very successful pilot as such, which I know now is being moved into other places. More recently, I think at the police shop at Bluewater, but Mr. Loudon, I think you'll know around that, whether that has started or not. Thank you. Next slide. So the way forward for me really is to offer as much support as I can to all of the businesses across the borough from a Dartford Town Against Crime point of view, and also to increase the number of people that we have on our Shop Safe scheme. Both are quite big jobs. We do have some assistance, as I say, with Dee helping with the Shop Safe scheme. All of it fits right nicely with the current development down in the town centre. The idea is to make it a place that people want to come shopping. So let's deal with the crime that we have down there. And I work closely every single day with our police officers and our police community support officers down there to deal with these offenders the best way that we can. I'm currently at a stage now where I'm hoping to be taking the first of our offenders through breaches of the notices and the fixed penalties. That's for the future. And I need to just try and increase the amount of information and the intelligence flow that we have between ourselves and other agencies, or between myself and other agencies, so that we can deal with these offenders the best way that we can. Whether that be signposting as well. There's a lot of signposting going on to other agencies, supportive agencies, in particular around drugs rehabilitation and alcohol abuse, etc. I need to make sure that people are using the radio correctly. If we don't use it correctly, we do come under scrutiny nationally. And really, it's about putting Dartford and DTAC on the map nationally, which I think we certainly are as far as the county is concerned, but it would be great to push it a little bit further than that. That's about it from me. If anyone has any questions, I think I've seen lots popping up.
Thank you very much, Karen. And it's good to see DTAC going from strength to strength, really, even in the current circumstances. I'm really pleased. Just a quick comment on the progress we've made around the radios in other areas. That's really, really good news. So I remember you said that last year, and we've on that. So that's fantastic. Okay, I do have a couple of questions so far. First one is Councillor Grehan, please.
Thank you. Just a quick question with regards to Shop Safe. Does that only apply in the town centre? And if so, are there any plans to take it to the mini high streets like Temple Hill, Fleet Estate and Swanscombe?
Yes, hi, Councillor Grehan. It doesn't have to stay within the town centre. It's certainly something that we want to push outside. All it is really is about making sure that the business is aware of what Shop Safe is, making sure that they've got one of these stickers up in the window so that those who are on the scheme know that they can go in there if that's what they want to do. So no, not just the town. It can be anywhere, and I really, really want to push it out across the borough. It's a fantastic system. The emergency services love it as well. You know, although it doesn't happen that often, but it doesn't matter how many times, does it? It only needs to be once. But also, if people, in particular around dementia, that's where we've had some good results with the system. If people get on trains and disappear off to other counties, which has happened in the past, and they've got one of these on them, you know, at least somebody can see it, make that phone call, and we can find out where they are. And from my old job as a police inspector, you know, when we deal with missing people, in particular, if you're looking at their vulnerabilities, especially around dementia and Alzheimer's, they become a real high priority for us to find as quickly as possible. So what we're trying to do really is push all of those through the Dementia Cafe. I've been down to the Dementia Cafe and that as well. I've had quite a few people come in on that. You know, from a policing point of view, it would be fantastic for them too, because we've actually got photographs of those individuals. So if someone does come in as a missing person and they are part of this scheme, then we would have an image of them immediately. So it is a fantastic scheme, but it's, I say, we relaunched it again in January. COVID happened, but we still will be pushing it as much as we can.
Fantastic. I'll email you about that. I've got a few.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now I did have Councillor Allen first, but I'm going to go to Councillor Gaskin and then Councillor Allen, because I know you want to make a comment generally on Shop Safe, don't you? So Councillor Gaskin, over to you.
Oh, hello, Karen. Well, thank you for the excellent presentation. Now, I've got sort of more detailed question about type of antisocial behavior that you may be dealing with. So is it just restricted to street antisocial behavior, or is it, you know, what kind of remit in addressing antisocial behavior you could possibly address?
For myself, it's town centre. So it's usually somebody committing antisocial behaviour alongside the fact that they've also been shoplifting or committing other types of theft types of crime. I wouldn't be able to pick up outside of that. That's what my colleagues, you know, in the community safety unit would pick up antisocial behaviour in other areas. So mine would basically be down within the town, and is usually alongside the offenders who are committing other criminal offences.
Okay, so I expect, you know, in recent months that there must have been quite a reduction on antisocial behaviour in the town centre.
Just our regulars.
Well, I mean, considering, you know, the clubs were closed, so there wasn't much of drinking, rowdy behaviour. People were not supposed to walk around too much. So I would have expected a reduction.
We may
Yes,
get
we
onto
did.
that, Councillor, when we go into performance, because I think we're going to be
Oh, yeah.
speaking a lot about that anyway. Yes, you may get some more detailed answers to your detailed question. But
Thank you,
Karen, do you want to say anything else?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Karen.
No, that's okay.
Okay, great. Then Councillor Allen. Councillor, can you just introduce yourself just so everybody knows who you are? Since the first.
Oh, well, I'm Councillor Anne Allen. I'm a cabinet member, and as you say, I have a portfolio for the elderly health, but including in that is the elder forums and things like that. Since you kindly mentioned me in dispatches, Karen, I do want to thank you because that was an excellent presentation. But I am extremely proud of the Shop Safe scheme, simply because, for those of you who don't know, this was instigated or conceived by adults with learning disabilities who experienced certain difficulties sometimes when they were shopping or out. And we launched it. I thought it was such a good thing because most adults with learning disabilities had more common sense than us. They're people with a great deal of common sense and simple things. And it was such a good idea that I brought it again back to the Borough Council, where we were able to roll it out to our sheltered housing units. We had stalls in the market. We introduced it at the Elder Forum, again, out to the parishes. Obviously, the forms are there at the Civic Centre. As I say, so it's been running extremely successful for quite a few years. Other towns across Kent actually latched onto it. So again, if you do have the card, sometimes there is a facility to be picked up again in other areas, as Karen said. So it is a really, really good scheme. Hoping to relaunch it again and get a thing. As I say, COVID and the GDPR constrained us a bit, but it's such a good scheme, and we should really celebrate the fact that it was kind of introduced in Dartford. And I think as well, Chairman, the work that you're doing on equalities and diversity shows again that we're a council that are trying to make sure that everybody is looked after equally and successfully. So it's a really good scheme, and I just want to say how proud it is, and well done to you, Karen. You know where I am if you need me to take it any further, because it is such a good scheme. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I have Councillor Wells. You want to go ahead, just introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name's Richard, and I am the Cabinet Member for Community Safety, but I'm also one of the councillors for Town Ward and a resident of Town Ward. So I know very well indeed the excellent work that's been done by DTAC over the years, and this is it's very good to see how well it's performing now. Aside from Town Ward, though, I wonder, Karen, would you be able to give some feedback or some idea of the feedback you've had from businesses who are members outside of Town Ward and around the borough, just so we could get some idea if if members maybe hear of businesses in their area who might want to sign up for this. So actually, we can give an idea of the benefits of the scheme for areas which maybe don't have the infrastructure of the town centre.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I have businesses in and along the London Road and the Brent, the London Road towards Swanscombe. I have the co-op up at Swanscombe. I now have the co-op up at Talbot Road, which is at Ebbsfleet. I have a number of Tesco's as well that we're trying to bring on now. The smaller businesses, yes, hopefully once we get these new radios in and they see the benefit of it, it doesn't matter where it is really. Some will have the benefit and support around the CCTV cameras and some won't. Longfield, there's certainly a lot of interest in Longfield to come on. The difficulty I had with that initially was the radio link. We've now fixed that. That's sorted. I think Tony Henley would be able to update you with around what's sort of happened with cameras and that, because I certainly know that came up last year around Longfield. But yeah, it doesn't matter where it is, as long as the radio will reach, of which I'm assured it will, around the whole borough. Some businesses will benefit more from it than others, depending on whether there's camera footage there or not, or camera ability or not. But any business anywhere, you know, they can come my way. They can have it on a trial basis to see whether it's beneficial for them. you know, if they decide that they don't want to, then so be it. They don't want to, but I'll be surprised if they don't see the benefit from it. Certainly.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Can I just come back on that? I mean, I absolutely agree with you that I'm sure that they would, that any business that does join it would see the benefit. But I mean, what I was getting at, have these ones that outside of the town centre around the borough, have they been long-standing members? Are they satisfied as members, generally speaking? So just so we can have some idea that it is beneficial for them. I mean, I know that it is, but it's just something that so members can actually go back if necessary and say, well, look, there are very satisfied businesses around the rest of the borough who are members of this and are long-standing members.
Yeah, we've had some really good results, in particular from the co-ops that I've just mentioned to you. They are new. I had 5 co-ops on anyway, but now we've obviously got a lot more within the borough. But the feedback I've had from them, I had a lovely email from the manager, for example, who has been on for a while actually at a co-op up at Temple Hill, who said to me, you know, wow, he's a new manager. He's been using the intelligence database, and basically he said to me, wow, I can't believe it. It's been fantastic. I've been able to identify one particular offender from up here off the back of that database, of which might have gone unidentified if it hadn't have been for the partnership. And I had that at the beginning of this week. So the same up at Talbot Road. We've had some fantastic work going on up there with some of our town centre criminals, our regular ones who we've pushed out because the town centre, obviously, you know, we've got the officers working down there all the time. So we pushed them out a little bit. But the workings between those managers and myself, you know, we've looked at people, we've had a couple remanded now in custody. We've had, you know, goods recovered and things, and lots of businesses being warned that people, you know, particular offenders are out and about. So they've been able to deter quite quickly. So actually preventing any loss from happening in the first place, because they'll stand on the door waiting for them if they know they're heading in that direction. So yes, it's been really interesting during lockdown, because I think we've been able to focus so much on it. So people, yeah, I've had the feedback. I've got the emails here, so it's nice to get them.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, thank you very much, Karen. It was a really good presentation, and my 5 years on the council, DTAC's gone from strength to strength. I'm really pleased. I'm sure all other members will agree. It's doing very well. So thank you very much. You're more than welcome to stay, but I'm sure you're very busy. So you please, if you do need to leave, you can leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members, as I said at the beginning, we're not going to do item 9 now. We're going to do that at the end. So we're going to move now on to item 10, which is the 2020 refresh of the Dartford and Gravesham CSP Community Safety Strategy. I've got an officer who's speaking to this. Is it Tony, Mark, or Jade?
It's Tony.
Okay,
Chair.
Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This, I think, will be a relatively brief item by way of introduction. In essence, as it says in the paper, the legislation requires that we, as a community safety partnership, produce a crime and disorder strategy, which runs for 3 years, and we do an annual refresh in the intervening periods. Well, this year was a refresh element of a document that is only a year old. We did the refresh as a result of the assessment, the crime and disorder assessment that we did back in December and January this year. And in essence, what we found was that the community safety plan or strategy that we currently have is still relevant, is still working in the right areas, the right priorities, and the action plans that are associated with them are still relevant. So in actual fact, we haven't changed the plan at all. There were, as part of the assessment though, I carried out a SWOT analysis of how we were performing against. It's interesting because we are the only community safety partnership in the country that involves 2 districts, and they are 2 very different districts. And I think one of the strengths of the partnership is that we can compare and contrast quite easily across the two districts. So we carried out that exercise, and within that refresh exercise, we came up with a number of recommendations, which, as you're going to hear this every time I speak at the moment, is that we've been somewhat stymied by COVID-19. It has taken on, obviously, we've been taking in different directions, but I would just like to, we have managed to action quite a few of the recommendations, and I'll just list the recommendations there on 3.5 of the document. The first thing we found when we were doing the assessment was that we could know, because the police had changed their recording database software, they couldn't provide us with crime data at a ward level, either for ASB or indeed for crime. That unfortunately is still the case. I mean, Neil may be able to add some more detail, but in essence, this is something which has been taken at a chief officer level, because it's, I think, a huge disadvantage for all concerned in terms of not being able to identify crime by ward level. It does affect to a certain degree how we can respond. But the good news is that there has been some movement that we can now do ASB at a ward level, which you'll see is in the performance report. So there has been some movement on that. It is a police internal issue, to be fair, and we are being given absolute assurance that that's been tackled at the highest level, chief officer level, with the company that's actually supplying the software. In terms of maintaining governance structures, that was another recommendation. There was because we are two different districts, we do operate in different ways at a tactical level. However, we have got very similar governance structures in terms of the meeting groups that we hold and the structures to which we work. Now, there has been a change coming along, I mentioned earlier, around the new initiative that's been run by Kent County Council, and this idea around something called contextual safeguarding, which is effectively a belief that as things have changed, particularly for adolescent and young adults, the risks to them don't always now appear in the home, which in traditional child safeguarding has always been the case. The risk to children is normally in the past has been in the home, and so safeguarding policy and practice is very much focused on the home life rather than the life outside of the home. Now, particularly with the advent of things like the growth in gangs and the criminal exploitation, which sadly is now much more prevalent than it has been in the past, there is a recognition, I think, and from my own personal view, a very personal recognition that parents can't always control what their children are being exposed to if they are out in open space. So there's a belief now that we, as partnerships, need to be identifying areas of, as I said before, shops or particular locations where we think there is a risk of heightened criminal exploitation. Now, we are forming a tactical group that will tackle that, but so are Gravesham. They're going to do it slightly differently to us, but we are still maintaining that overall governance structure, which I think is really important for us for the CSP going forward. In terms of the violent crime and domestic abuse, we touched upon this at the last overview and scrutiny about there was a disparity between repeat victims in Dartford. There was much higher in Dartford than there was in Gravesham. And I think Neil actually explained that last time. It was a blip in reporting and something which the police were not concerned about. If members have got further questions, I'm sure Neil will take that once I've finished. In terms of antisocial behaviour and environmental crime, this was again, I think Dartford were probably, our processes were more developed in terms of our enforcement activity than Gravesham. I know Gratian have carried out a review and are putting a new strategy in place. So again, it just shows the power of having two districts working together, but not the same, because we are able to compare and contrast. Preventing offending and reducing reoffending, again, part of the government's push in terms of adolescent crime, and particularly violent crime, for adults under the age of 25 and young people, the government have provided funding for a number of violence reduction units. They started in London, and they have been provided funding to a number of counties across the country, Kent being one of them, which has led to the creation of Kent's Violence Reduction Unit, which is run by KCC in partnership with the police. They are provided with funding, and we work with them in terms of particular initiatives. Some ideas of initiatives that we are currently involved in: we have taken delivery of a number of mobile CCTV cameras, which we will be deploying. It's been slightly, again, curtailed by the our COVID ability under COVID, but we have got delivery of those cameras and ready to deploy them. And another initiative, particularly tackling violent crime, is that we have purchased and will be supplying our nightclubs and shopping centre, well, 3 main shopping centres, with first aid, with field first aid kits for serious injury. We will be providing that free of charge to those locations, and offering training for the staff. And that's the sort of thing that we can work with. So there is funding available for particular initiatives that we want to get involved in, and that continues to develop. And finally, the protecting vulnerable people. Chair, this is a subject which you'll be aware of, is in its own right. We could spend hours talking about this. Simply, Dartford is I think the 7th fastest growing district in the country in relation to changing demography in terms of people's background. And we are involved in a significant project with the Migration Fund that would help us understand that. So again, it's something I think we are on the front foot on. We need to be, because the changes are happening so quickly. But that's something from work I'm involved with Sherry and now Councillor McLean to take that forward. So I think in summary, Chair, the plan or the strategy remains the same, but the actions that we highlighted where we thought we needed to tweak are being dealt with, and I'm really open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I have Councillor Moat.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Tony. I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear me asking about the question about cameras and where they're likely to be located, and whether or not they're now light enough to be attached to KCC lampposts.
Okay. Yes. For other councillors who aren't aware of this issue that we've been faced with, Kent County Council are replacing all of their lampposts for a lighter model, which they're called coastal lampposts. I don't want to go into too much detail, but basically they don't rust, but also they're very lightweight, and they struggle with. We're not allowed to mount any camera that's over 3.7 kilos in weight, and a lot of our cameras have been and continue to be, because actually that's quite a low threshold. So, David, where we are with that is that if we want to put a camera that is on over 3.7 kilos, we have to have what's known as a load-bearing test, which costs, well, one would cost £1,000 per lamppost. However, we've negotiated as a community safety managers group, we've negotiated with KCC where we can actually have group testing done, which will allow us to knock down the price considerably. So that still has to be done. We are also working with the company that we have taken delivery of the cameras from, because obviously we took delivery of the cameras before this was made aware. We were made aware of this, But we think we can reduce the weight by changing the insides of the camera. So we're working on it. It has been a problem, but we now know where we stand, and we're working to it.
Do we know where we're going to put them?
Well, they're mobile, so they'll go where they need to go. At the moment, I have to be honest, I think we are looking around the Swanscombe area, but I have to be very careful in terms of where that deployment will be, because we obviously have to be cognizant of the lighting, and also the way that we can connect the cameras.
Thank you. That's fine. Lovely. Thank you.
And there's also the issue of ensuring that there's a proportionality assessment as well. Anytime you put up any cameras, is that right, Tony? You've got to kind of.
It is, yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, we work to the ICO standards, and we will conduct a full survey prior to any camera being erected in terms of privacy and the like.
That's great. So just for members, it's not a case of just putting a camera up because we feel a camera is going to make people feel better. There needs to be a lot of evidence to justify it. There's quite very strict rules, and rightfully so, in place as a consequence. Okay, I have Councillor Garden.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question and one also comment. Like Councillor Moat, very happy to hear about the cameras. Will they also be deployed against fly tipping? Excuse my throat.
Yes. In essence, no. We don't deal with fly tipping per se. That is dealt by another department within the Community Safety Unit under Richard Cherry's guidance. They have their own ways of cameras, and they will continue to deploy them in the way that they see fit. But ours are a different. We have a different responsibility.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification on that.
Thank you.
Because I'm aware of the alternative organisation, but I didn't want things to be getting confused again. Also, in page 45 of your report, I see a wonderful list of objectives and successes that you've had in initiatives. Yeah. What I would like to see is some quantitative information about that. You know, how successful have these initiatives been? For example, you know, how many people have come to the out of hours IDVA service, and what has been the outcome of that? Has it helped a number of people, or has it been a good idea? Unfortunately, people don't come forward, and therefore we need to think of something different. Then you could go through most of them and say, can we hear more about how well they did, how many people were affected, or things that were really stopped because of it? Thank you.
Yeah, if I may just respond on that, Councillor. Yes, you're absolutely right. We have had I think it is well rehearsed about. We've strayed away from numerical values over the past few years because we've had issues with accuracy over data. That particular example that you quoted around the infra service, that is reported back to KCC, who actually run the infra service. But in our performance report, we are putting numbers, numerical values back into the report because our databases are now much more stable in terms of it's much more accurate. Having said that, this current performance report we're going to discuss in a moment doesn't actually look at that in too detail, because it was specifically around the impact of COVID on this quarter, and that was why we've phrased the report in the way it has. But yes, I take your point, and we are putting those back in.
Yeah, I have noted them within the COVID one, and that was my supplementary. Why can't we have that on a more regular basis? And can I even suggest it would be interesting for members to see them perhaps every half yearly, and not just have to wait to your next annual report, so we can see trends and become aware of what might be happening in our wards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I have Mark Salisbury next. Mark, if you'd just like to introduce yourself. We all know you and what you do, but just in case anybody's watching, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Mark Salisbury. I'm the Enforcement, Regulatory Services and Community Safety Unit Manager. So essentially, I'm Tony's manager for the purposes of this meeting. I just wanted to further clarify the question raised by Councillor Gardner in relation to fly tipping cameras and give some assurance to other members that this is a very serious part of our business. Incidentally, I think councillors will want to hear that in terms of the Kent fly tipping response across districts, we remain far higher than any other district in terms of investigations, outcomes, and also intelligence reports. So once again, we're leading the way as a district. But on camera deployments, they are an entirely different beast to serve a different purpose, really. So we do use covert cameras, but not covertly, and I'll explain. So those cameras are designed to be in fly tip hotspots, often identified by very good feedback from councillors, and I appreciate the information that you give us on that. Signage, overt signage, is put at those locations, but the cameras, which hopefully and indeed do detect offenders, are covert, so obviously they can't be stolen, damaged, or anything else. And they're very dynamic in the way that my officers can deploy them very, very easily. They're battery run for that purpose, and they're not lifetime monitored like our CCTV control centre can monitor other antisocial behaviours type cameras in the town centre area. So I just wanted to clarify and give some reassurance on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was really useful to hear.
Chair, can I just endorse what Mark has said? As you know, that is one of my concerns, and have been involved with his staff on that, so I can endorse that this is indeed happening. My concern earlier was other workings were going to get in our way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I have Councillor Green.
Thank you. I have a question with regards to Operation Ransom, which is outlined on page 45 under the antisocial behaviour key successes. I'm in a ward which suffers from a lot of nuisance bike activity, and I found it quite difficult to have people feed into any intelligence on that. So I'd really like some guidance on how people can do that more successfully, and also the work being done with youth engagement on nuisance bikes, but also on other things like fire safety and so on. I feel that's going to be very difficult in the coming months, where schools and scout groups and everyone like that are going to limit the amount of people coming in. So I'm wondering if there's any plan for that kind of education to take place in the kind of new normal we find ourselves in.
Before officers answer that, because it's operationally sensitive, is that something we want to discuss in the closed part of the meeting? I'll take some guidance on that. Or are we happy for it to go in the live meeting?
I think, Chair, from personally, as it's within the performance report, I think that actually comes up. It may well be we can tackle the whole motor vehicle issue in one hit, maybe.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor, is that okay?
It's absolutely fine.
Okay, that's great. Any other member or officer who wants to talk to this part? See no one indicating. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, mute myself by accident there. Tony, thank you very much for that. We'll move on very swiftly to item 11, which is the Regulation 9 notice. Is it noted, members? Just put a thumb up. Any questions on that? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, item 12, the Kent and Medway Police and Crime Panel update. Well, we haven't got one. Councillor Wells, you're here. Do you just want to give an update to members as to why we don't have one? I know it's alluded to, but just a bit of a brief.
Yep, absolutely. I certainly can. As it rightly says on the agenda, the February and June meetings of the Kent and Medway Police and Crime Panel were cancelled. The February meeting was actually just a reserve date for a possible second budget meeting, so it tends to be cancelled every year. And the June meeting was cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic, so the next meeting is in September. However, I thought it would be useful to hear about how the Commissioner and Kent Police have dealt with the COVID period. I know members do appreciate an update from the Commissioner, so in preparation for this meeting, I did actually contact Matthew Scott to ask for any updates, and his office were kind enough to send me through a report. So I'll just give a brief summary of that now, if I may, if people are going to be interested. Yeah, okay. Right, this was information he gave was mostly from the middle of June, but should still all be relevant. And the wider message was that the Commissioner's Office and Kent Police have been able to maintain levels of service with a visible community police presence, whilst like other organisations, they've been able to move the more non-frontline functions to online and home working. Demands on services have been monitored, and one example that was given was there is anticipated significant demand in victim support services due to court case backlogs. In terms of support for services, there was a £25 million national fund set up by the government for domestic abuse and sexual violence services, of which Kent Police were allocated 625,000. Half of that went to domestic abuse services that were already commissioned by the PCC. A quarter went to domestic abuse services that were not already commissioned by the PCC, and the rest went to sexual violence services, some of which were commissioned by the PCC and some were not. This money was to deal with like short-term income disruption, costs associated with changing working practices, such as like buying new ITs, things like that, and to address increases in demand. Beyond that, that was obviously just for, say, domestic abuse and sexual violence services. Beyond that, the Commissioner also set up his own local emergency fund of £100,000 for any of his commissioned services that had experienced difficulties during the COVID period. So commissioned services were able to get grants of up to £10,000 to cover reduced fundraising income, or having having to upgrade IT, or having to fund any new or increased services specifically in response to COVID-19. When I talk about commissioned services, by the way, just to be clear, I'm talking about like charities and sort of services that the Commissioner commissions essentially to provide support services to the police. There was some information given on crime figures. I'm not going to go into that because I know we're going to have more localised and detailed figures coming up in a later agenda item, performance. So just one other thing I wanted to update you on. I know at the last meeting there was a big interest in the cadet program. As you know, there's a plan to have the police cadet unit in Dartford, and I was concerned about whether this had been affected by the pandemic. So I asked if it was still planned and what the situation was with it. I was told that it is still planned. Thankfully, that's a good thing, of course, but it's taken longer than expected. And the reason it's taken longer than expected is because of a shortage of volunteer leaders. So basically people like essentially like scout leaders, people who volunteer to help run the cadet unit. This is open to anyone over 18. I was told that there's actually an online recruitment event for police cadet leaders, which is next week on the 5th of August. Details are on the Kent Police website. Alternatively, if anyone knows of anyone who might be interested or wishes to find out more, there's a lot of information and contact details also on the Kent Police website, even if people can't attend that event. So it's worth sharing that if members sharing that if you can. As I said at the last meeting, I think the cadet scheme is a really great project, and I really do think it'd be beneficial to the young people in Dartford. So if there's anything we can do as members to help make that happen, then we should. And I think that helping to spread the word that they're looking for volunteer leaders is certainly something we can hopefully help with. So as I mentioned, there's a link to that. I'm happy to send that link round if members are interested. It will just save everyone individually going hunting around for it. So yeah, let me know, and happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Green, I've got yourself.
Me first again. Thank you. Richard, would it be possible for the Commissioner to come and speak to us as a committee and for us to ask him questions now we're meeting in such a accessible format?
He did when he was first elected, but you're right, maybe in this.
I wasn't a councillor then. That's quite 5 years ago, wasn't it? So it'd be very useful for us to hear from him again.
Okay.
I'm not convinced he ever did he? I know we asked a few times. We were sharing. He didn't, I don't think. I think we had his chief of staff, and we asked a few times.
Definitely him, I remember.
That might not have been to this. Mr. Hook, was it to this meeting that he came, or was it? I think it was to the parish meeting.
He came and addressed the Borough and Parish Council, who got their invite in first. We then subsequently invited the Commissioner to address the Crime and Disorder Committee, but of course, it was early in his tenure. He had lots of invites. Dartford had already benefited. Just to reassure members who weren't members then, the forum invited all Dartford councillors to attend that meeting, which is why the chairman's recollections are so vivid and accurate. But by all means, I mean, I've got intros into the Commissioner's office. Perhaps Councillor Wells would probably be the best conduit to reiterate Dartford's interest in the Commissioner attending. Would that be something, a suggestion that might be pursued? Thank you.
I'm certainly happy to ask him.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got some questions. Councillor Harman, I think, is next.
Yeah, just to add to what the discussion you just had, we asked him to come to Swansea and Greenhithe Town Council, and he came along to that one day, so he's quite happy to come to meetings.
Okay, thanks. We do need to be mindful of the fact that there is an election next year, so bear in mind we only meet a few times a year. We may find ourselves in a position where he's not allowed to due to pre-election rules, but we'll see what we can do, and we'll take it from there, I suppose. Okay, any other questions on this for Councillor Wells and the PCP? That's great. Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you very much. Item 13 is the Crime and Disorder Overview and Scrutiny Committee Annual Report for the year 2019 to 2020. You've got a cover report and you've obviously got the draft report, and it's for comments or suggestions, improvements, before we recommend that it goes to the GAC for approval. Before any questions, I just want to take this opportunity to thank David Hook, who's ably and very well clerked this committee ever since I've been a councillor. He's done a fantastic job on this report, as always. So thank you very much to David and to all his colleagues, particularly within the Community Safety Unit, who are contributing to that. Any questions, comments, observations on the report, members? No? Thank you. Councillor Green?
Thank you. It won't surprise me on what I'm going to say because I'm very repetitive. Would it be possible to add in some more information about the domestic abuse work which is going on around the borough, just for members to have more information about that? There's a lot of interagency work going on, and I think it would be beneficial for members to be aware of some more of the specifics about that so they can be more helpful to residents.
Thank you, Councillor. In specific terms of the annual report, do you mean?
Well, more in the work plan.
Oh, right. This item's about the annual report, so I just remind.
I was looking at if we could put that on the work plans in the report, though, isn't it?
No, the work plan's a separate item, Councillor. The annual report.
Okay, I'll come back to that. I've got them both. Okay, we'll come back to that.
If I may just complete the point I was trying to make. I'm sorry I didn't make it very well. It came up in the Policy Overview Committee as well, and the Scrutiny Committee. I have the sorry task of producing 3 annual reports, one for each of those committees, and as each one comes up each year, I just have to remind members, most respectfully of course, that these annual reports are just a summary. They're just a summary of what's gone on with that particular committee's work throughout the year. And of course, all the details, the full details, are contained in all the published minutes of the meetings. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Anybody else on this item? Okay, we're now going to move on to item 14, which is the review of the committee's work plan for 2020-2021. Councillor Green, obviously, let's just go through that again. So you want to see more on there around domestic abuse and IDVAs and so on, and all that work?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. I've been having some really good conversations with housing and people that there is some really good joined up work going on, and I just am wary that it's not widely known. And I think there's potentially some good information that should be shared more widely.
Yeah, certainly around awareness. I mean, that is, you know, when we get on to performance, we all know that one of the crimes that has gone up significantly is domestic abuse throughout the COVID pandemic, and local authorities are doing a lot of work around getting awareness out there about what services are available, so people are not suffering in silence, because what you have is a situation where a victim is being forced to stay with the perpetrator because of lockdown and because of restrictions and because they're furloughed and so on. So you're absolutely right. Awareness, yes. We need to be careful about operational tactics used by agencies. Obviously, we don't want offenders to be aware of how our agencies are taking innovative steps to protect people who are at risk. But, you know, point well made, Councillor, point well made on that. Okay, I've got Councillor Garden.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the item update on telephone fraud, can I suggest that be expanded to include internet and cyber fraud as well, and not just restricted to telephones?
Yep, that's fine with me. Any observations on that, members, on that amendment? No? Okay, just something I was discussing on a private chat with Sherry, who's the Strategic Director for External Services, was around what role environmental health play in this CSP and towards the Council's objectives. If you think about environmental health deal with noise nuisance, they deal with other sort of environmental nuisance that could be perpetrated by people causing ASB. So I would like to tentatively put that on the work plan, maybe a presentation from environmental health, just on what environmental health do, the scope of their work. Particularly, it's a very interesting in that we share the service with Sevenoaks, so we can look at comparisons with Sevenoaks and us around that partnership. Until such time, Sherry can have a discussion, or we can have a discussion offline as to whether or not it's appropriate in this committee or is it appropriate in another committee. Is that okay with everybody? That's great. Thank you very much. And, you know, if we can get it in this civic year, if we do agree to do it, if we can get it in this civic year, then that's great. If not, then it can roll on, I suppose. We just need to make sure we've got it in the right place and that we've got the right information that members will find useful. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're now going to move on to item 9, which is the excluded item on the agenda. So for those of you who may be watching at home or watching this stream at another time, the meeting for you is now ended, and we are going to be moving into a closed session because we're going to be discussing performance, and there's sensitive information there with regards to police and council data. So this is an exempt item, and we're now closing the meeting into a closed session. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to get the minutes or a brief note on this meeting, you can download them from the website in due